Welcome to the CMO Chapter podcast, where we dive deep into the dynamic world of Chief Marketing Officers. Join us as we explore the careers, insights, and strategies of top marketing executives who shape the brands we know and love. Whether you're a seasoned marketer, aspiring CMO, or simply just curious to understand what it really takes to step into the shoes of a CMO. This podcast is your backstage pass to discovering what it's like to really lead and innovate in the ever-evolving landscape of business. Stay tuned as we uncover the stories of the visionaries behind the brand. I am delighted to have the fabulous Libby Hodgson join us today, the CMO at UNICEF. Thank you, Libby, for being part of the CMO Chapters podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome. So, Libby, I've got I'm really excited, I've got to say, to be interviewing you. I think I first came across you at the ACAM event last year in Sydney. And yeah, there was a lot of, already just from what you shared around AI, I was really, really quite, blown away and really intrigued. So I've got a few questions which we're going to cover, but I thought today, if we can start a bit of a quick intro from you and then we'll kick things off.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, I'm Libby Hodgson. I currently am the CMO or Chief Marketing Officer at UNICEF Australia. I've been here since about 2020. So I was one of those people who had that rare experience of joining a new organisation during lockdown and getting to know everybody through a screen before you met them in real life. Prior to that, my career has spanned a number of different organisations. I actually worked for UNICEF in the UK before I moved to Australia. I held a number of different roles at Taronga Zoo. And before that began way back in financial services. But I think the various disciplines of marketing have always been the common thread through my different career and roles.
Is it fair to say when you look back at the beginning of your career, I mean, I'm just curious to understand this. I mean, have you always been quite ambitious and driven? Like, did you have your sights on getting to a senior leadership role at some point? Or is that, like most people, I guess, come with a little bit of confidence along the way to finally get that?
I think I've always had a certain amount of drive to step out of my comfort zone and do things a bit different. If I look right the way back, even from when and I've often wondered, actually, did I do myself any favours through this or not? But through the process of leaving school, choosing college, choosing courses, I always took a different choice to the majority. So I took a choice to do a course that took me to a different college. I often kind of split from the pack. And I think I did that in my working life as well. But I also think, I think this is probably a question that maybe a lot of women in leadership roles or people in leadership roles would find kind of the reflection in. I don't think when I began my career, and it was, as many people, I began as a marketing assistant in a relatively small organisation, I at that point had an aspiration or even thought that it was an aspiration I could have to be in a very senior leadership role. And I think a few chance opportunities and that's definitely been an ambition in the latter half of my career and one that I've been lucky to realise. But in the very early stage of my career, it didn't even occur to me that I could put my sights there.
Yeah. It's quite remarkable, isn't it? I mean, I speak to many leaders like yourself, and often it's the case. I mean, we all start somewhere, but then isn't it interesting where we actually eventually land? And you know what? We've all still got a couple of years still in us. So the journey's not stopped yet.
Most definitely.
Yeah, most of us are still halfway for sure. Oh dear. Okay. All right. And when you look back, is there anything that you wish you changed? Any decisions you think, God, I wish I'd started earlier there, or I wish I hadn't worked in that industry and maybe gone here instead? Is there any reflections there?
Do you know what? There aren't, because I always think because I really love the work I do. I love the people I work with and the job I do. Okay. I think I made a conscious choice to move into the more of the for-purpose sector. I don't think I had a mixture of motivations for doing that at the time. Some were very values orientated, some were very practical and professional orientated. But I think it's led me on a pathway where I've been able to do the work I love in organizations I really enjoy working in. So I think if you think that where you are now is the sum total of all of those decisions you've made along the way, then no, I don't look back and go, damn, I had that sliding doors moment that I didn't take. But at the same time, of course, if I look back over my career, there are many things I would do differently. I think anybody who says otherwise is probably not being wholly honest.
Look, absolutely. I think there's, and I can also, speak to that myself. You know, you look back and you're like, God, I can't believe I actually said that or did that. But hey, lesson learned, off we go. I guess on that, given that, I mean, it dovetails quite nicely to one of my many other questions I've got down my sleeve. But learnings, I mean, what would you say, I guess, you know, has there been any hard learnings that you've experienced throughout your career that you think, you know, you'd feel comfortable sharing that might benefit, you know, other marketers?
I think there's a few different things that I've learned. And I think one, probably the biggest, that is still an ongoing learning through my career, is the ability to deal with conflict and be comfortable with conflict. And I think that's something that I experienced. I changed quite a while back. I moved into a new role that I didn't probably have the full appreciation at the time that it was a brand newly created role, which is always quite a unique thing when you step into something that's new in an organization. And I think it was the first time I really came up against quite antagonistic colleagues that I needed to learn to work with. I didn't have this reflection at the time. At the time, I just really experienced conflict in the workplace that I needed to deal with, and that was a challenge. Yeah. Looking back, I think the big learning I've taken from that is that actually the role that I went into was a new role in the organization that overlapped with all of these other people's roles. And no one had really been given clarity over the purpose I was there to serve or the changes it meant for them. So they themselves were dealing with change. And I think that's been a lesson to me in that clarity with people in their kind of roles, responsibilities, you know, that kind of clear is kind mentality and approach to work. But I think in a much larger context, as I've evolved professionally, and I think with just age and experience, been able to become more comfortable with conflict in the workplace.
Yeah. I think that's a great answer, because at the end of the day, I mean, I don't really know anyone that's super, if I'm honest, that's really comfortable. That's an absolute expert necessarily at dealing with conflict. You know, I think for most people, it's an uncomfortable, you know, thing that, you know, especially when you're a leader, it's like, oh God, you know, often there's no training. You just get thrown in the deep end and off you go.
And there's something about that ability to be kind of okay with discomfort. And sometimes that's in the weight of decisions you need to make or the implication of decisions that you make, but it's that being able to compartmentalize sometimes and have things that are uncomfortable, but it's okay.
Yeah. Within our audience and the listeners that, you know, we have within this podcast, we've got quite a few who are in that, I'm going to say, sort of like mid-level kind of marketing manager that one day really want to, you know, get to the C-suite or head of role. And then you've also got, on the other hand, a lot of CMOs as well who are, you know, curious and want to tap into, you know, stories. I'm curious to know if you were giving advice to, you know, I'm talking more the junior end, perhaps the specialist marketers in this market. In your opinion, what skills do you think, and I know there's an obvious one coming here, but what skills would you say, you know, these individuals or even marketing managers in general really need to be doing or focusing on to stay relevant?
Wow, it's I think you could give a different answer to that question every year at the moment. I think I heard somebody use a phrase that really struck me as interesting and so true. They were talking about a variety of professions, but certainly marketing professions. And they referred to them, the conversation was actually about the impact that AI is having on the entry level of the workforce and what's going to happen if that experience disappears. That's where the conversation was. But the phrase they used was they referenced kind of marketing as a profession, as an apprenticed profession, which Apprenticeships in art and marketing is not a concept I've ever thought of before, but actually when you think about it, and as I look back to my own career, starting as a marketing assistant, before that, actually, I did a lot of secretarial work, which is office-based administrative work. But I think those stepping stones of experience build out the full skill set that you need in a marketing leadership role. And I think the skills that you need in marketing are different at different stages. So I think early on in a marketing career, a lot of the work you do is around project management, delivery, execution. I think as you go up through the stages, you need to start to have that ability to think strategically, that ability to think whole organization. The roles that I've done in a marketing sense have always been highly commercial with direct financial outcomes. I think financial literacy is a really important skill that an awful lot of people don't have to an adequate level to really enable them to progress well. And I think once you progress to the more senior stages, to be honest, it's about people. It's about stakeholder liaison. It's people management. It's about offsetting different needs. But I think it's being open to I think it's looking at the roles as the skills you're going to gain from them as much as the job or the title, because it's the combination of those skills that build over time. And AI is just going to come along and change the whole shooting box of what we all need to do and how we need to work.
Just a bit. And I guess that brings me on quite nicely to my next question, because I mean, we're gonna talk about it, but I've been having a lot of conversations at the moment with various leaders myself, where we're talking more around how the importance of soft skills, it really needs to be put into play, given that we're all in this heavily, digitized world. So when I'm actually interviewing marketers at the moment, I mean, I've done this for a long, long time, but I'm always looking at how you articulate yourself. Are you confident without being cocky? That have you got empathy? Like, what's your emotional, intelligence? Like all that stuff. I feel like personally, from my perspective, it's going to become even more needed. Like that strength, as much as we can have AI as technical expertise. I think, my personal opinion is having it blended together. What are your thoughts?
I 100% agree. I had a really interesting, this is an off the topic of marketing, but saying how, conversation I had years and years back, and someone was talking about the skills and the talents that we nurture right early on from an education phase. And they were using the example of a surgeon versus a carpenter, right? So the two children at school, the one who will become the surgeon, arguably is the more academic and has taken that very heavy kind of academic pathway through school to reach that level, as they should. I want all surgeons to have that good level of training. The one who's a carpenter has an innate talent and ability to create, which effectively is what many surgeons do. And they were saying, which of those skills can be learned? Which is the easier to teach and be learned? But we bias right up front, I think, to those technical specialisms. And I think I wholeheartedly agree. What people need and what I value the most when I'm hiring into my team is that emotional intelligence, you said it, empathy, the kind of abstract reasoning, the critical thinking. And I think more and more we need the education system to catch up that they're the priority outcomes, not taught because information is available at the press of a button now.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot that quite easily are going to be like, oh yeah, I know this and I can access it. And look at me, aren't I amazing? Where, what about the ones who've actually got the real personalities and the right attitude? They're the ones that are going to, stand out.
And the conversation I referenced earlier about kind of the impact of AI on the workplace was saying how AI and technology tools can give this sort of fake capability bump to people.
Yeah.
But very quickly, their lived experience taps out. And if you're not gaining that experience, you're not able to progress and deploy technology for what it's actually needed for.
Which, yeah, curious to ask as well. So when I came across you, I think it was last year at the ACAM event, I was really, because I think back then I hadn't really at that point, if I'm honest, listened or spoken to as many CMOs that were really, in that mid of implementing AI across their teams and departments. Like there's a lot of conversation. There was a lot that absolutely were preparing for it, some very early days into it. But what I found quite interesting, I felt like you were really in the thick of it, and you were already able to share, okay, well, this is what we've learned. This is what's working really well. Are you able to share anything there? Because I think there's going to be a lot of people that would love to hear, what's working. And I guess, how did you even begin to start thinking? Because I mean, nowadays there's so many platforms out there. How do you even begin to work out what's right for your organization?
Gosh, where to begin with that and not talk for too long. There's a number of functional steps that we took. I think there's two things. I think there's the practical steps that we took to introduce and adopt AI and the way we did it that were catalytic. I also think it was the culture and values of the organization that enabled us to do it. So I think it was very much that mix of right activities in the right place. From an activities perspective, we began we didn't begin from a technical place or a technology position. We began from our approach, our values, and our guardrails for using AI. So we thought up front, what do we want to use AI for? Where is the opportunity for us? What is okay for us to do with AI and what isn't? And we didn't know all the answers to that. So that was about putting in place a process and a structure whereby people could identify and nominate a particular AI tool or platform and a use for that tool and platform, and both would be approved independently to say, yeah, okay, you can use Canva, and yes, okay, you can use it to do this outcome. And then we evaluate that. So that enabled us to, that empowered teams to start using AI quite easily. And it moved us out of that place of, do we or don't we do AI, and everyone paralyzed until we've made that decision. So that was a game changer. Then we had a really clear directive from our board, from our CEO, that AI was an opportunity for us. Our CEO very openly used the language around using AI to stretch as an organization, not shrink. And I think that went a long way, along with some other targeted communications, to address kind of the fear and concerns about AI, which are real and evolving. I think that's not a one and done conversation. And we've gone from there. We've done different structural things. So on a temporary basis, we aligned technology much more closely into my marketing remit so that we could accelerate the adoption of AI in a marketing context. Yeah. We have an AI strategy that goes right across the business. And for us, that also looks externally at the kind of protection and the safety measures that are needed for children as AI evolves. And that's an interesting kind of then feedback loop into how we use AI ourselves. And it's gone from there. We did a whole day session to get all the teams just sharing what they were doing, using tools.
Yeah.
Where everybody has access to a basic AI tool, and then different teams have bespoke tools depending on what they need. Always starts with the standpoint of what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What is the business need that we need to fix, or the advantage that we can gain, as opposed to here's a nice piece of technology and how do we use it? In terms of why it worked, we have a very, I would say, kind of culturally safe organization where people are encouraged to experiment and do things differently and stretch outside of their roles. So that naturally leads to an environment where people bring forward ideas. We had structured our whole marketing discipline to be digital first years before kind of your large language model AI came about. Yeah. That meant that we had a team that was very much concentrated around quite advanced level use of our data and digital and performance marketing skills, which basically meant that unintentionally, we'd created the perfect team to adopt and ideate AI across the marketing place. So that helped. We had an excellent, highly skilled CIO who joined us, who was very progressive in her approach to introducing AI. So there's never one thing, I think, with these things. And I think there's never one solution. It's the combination of all of those, and it's the culture of the organization. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No. Well, I think it warrants a long answer. There's a lot happening there behind the scenes. And I also think two things that resonate for me is I love how you, as a leader, and it seems like it's a bit of a theme here, that you've been able to empower, the marketing team and division and go, right, guys, okay, if you find platforms that you think would be beneficial for you in your role, share it, and then we will decide because then at least you're giving that accountability to them and they're not thinking, oh God, well, AI is going to take my job and oh God, it's actually, well, no, if anything, we're actually saying use it, it's going to enhance your role, it's going to make things a lot better. And then the second one being you've had awesome leaders in, C-suite board who've gone, guys, we're on this, let's change, which is huge, huge.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think to your point about that empowerment, one of the things that I know in my role is that across my team and the disciplines of marketing, there are people in the team who know their role so much better than I do. And their skills and capabilities in that area of work is way beyond mine. And the time they have to put to deep thinking about their area of marketing is greater than mine. So they're far better placed to identify the opportunities and make the recommendations than I am.
Yeah. I think, look, it's if only other leaders can follow suit, then fantastic. I think there's going to be others that will be listening to this. And I mean, there'll be some that no doubt are already doing this. I've got no doubt, and
Absolutely.
some who are very much at the beginning. I want to chat about personal brand. So there's a lot of talk around, if you're looking for a new role now, or if you're wanting to evolve and you want to develop yourself, you really got to think professionally around your personal brand. And I look at some people that, they do a lot around, I don't know, becoming a judge on a specific event, or else they want to be a keynote speaker, or they do a podcast or whatever it may be. Is that something that you personally have worked at yourself as you've got more senior in more leadership roles? And would you advise others to also really start getting onto this earlier rather than later?
Yes, it is. And I think it is valuable for people to be seen for where their expertise is and be recognized for that. I think from a personal perspective, doing it means pushing myself out of my comfort zone. I'm not a person who will be kind of outwardly gregarious or showy in the things I do.
Mm-hmm.
But it is something that I've become more attuned to as my career has progressed. I was given some very sage advice once from someone when it was about a particular award that I didn't enter. And I was saying, oh no, I can't enter that award. I was like, that's not my work. That's the work of all of the team. I can't claim all of that in my name.
Yeah.
And they said, well, think of this as actually a great way to give recognition to your team. So I think that's been something that I've cultivated on, that it's not overclaiming or overstating when you talk about your team's work, if it's giving like the right and appropriate recognition to everything that everybody does to achieve outcomes. I also think there's a role for people to champion each other. So
yes,
as I said, it doesn't come naturally to me to do this. I've had the real benefit in the last couple of years of a couple of people who have put me forward for a number of different things. They've tagged me in LinkedIn posts. They've referenced me in certain ways. The team at ACAM, for example, are great at doing that. And I think there's a role in that. It's kind of given me pause to reflect and think, well, who across my network can I do that for? Because I do think there's promote yourself, but also recognize the other people who you can help promote.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of leaders that I meet, and I mean, even when I speak to them, they'll say, Lise, what can I do for you? And I just love that. I'm like, gosh, here I am, little Lucy, a new chapter talent. And I think, yes, that's their behaviors, how they are within their team, as well. They're giving back, to promote and, support as well. Really important. Absolutely. And it's right. I think, it's interesting. You look at people like yourself who are CMOs and, you've got a huge, UNICEF Australia, massive. So naturally you think, oh, they'll be really confident, but actually behind the scenes, you've got to work at it,
Yeah, everybody has their own kind of strengths and their own foibles, and
yeah, absolutely. In your view, in this day and age, bit of a question, but what do you think it takes to make in terms? I'm looking at skills specifically. What skills, in your view, in this day and age, does a successful CMO need to have?
they need to have a whole toolbox of skills. I think I've mentioned a few of them already in just that. I think they need to be strategic is such an overused word, but I think the ability to understand the strategy of an organization, and I think really see how marketing is an enabler and an engine to an organization's outcomes. It's not the shiny wrapper around the edges that just does the adverts and communication lines. It's really how the business objectives, the product, the customer, whatever type of business it is, it's how all of that connects, stays relevant externally. And then I talk about kind of strategic thinking. That's what I mean. You've got to be good with people. Got to be good with people. You need to be a communicator. You need to be able to articulate what you think to other people and have them understand the opportunity and the vision in things. And you need to be curious because the world doesn't stop. You need to be constantly curious and open to the way things happen changing and doing things differently. And AI, again, we're all living that at the moment, but it's true in many, many ways. And you've got to have a bit of inner resilience because most CMOs I know, they're expected to be across so many things. People, budgets, team, timelines, deadlines. Everyone pivots left, right, and center now and does things differently. And you've got to be able to kind of hold all of those different things and not feel weight them too heavily because it's a lot of responsibility.
Some CMOs I speak to say, you know what, I love what I do. I really do. And I love the company I work for, but it can feel lonely sometimes. Have you ever been in environments where, you can kind of go, well, yeah, look, there are times when you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders and, or not really?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the organization and the leadership team that you're in. And I think if I think of my career, I've had I'm part of an excellent kind of executive leadership team in my current role and in my previous role, who are very much, they're my team. They're my peers, and they're the people who, in a work context, I look to for support or I'll brainstorm my problems with. For me, I think the lonelier sort of career phase was that kind of senior middle management where you have to have that slight professional distance from the people in your team and the managers in your team, but you're not part of that smaller leadership group. You're part of that bigger management cohort. So that's more the point in my career where I've been like, oh, I haven't got a person. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Right. No, absolutely. No, I think it does. Do you think I'd love to get your thoughts on this. There's a couple of conversations I've had with CMOs around this, but they say, oh, the role of CMO in the future, it's going to change into being a chief customer officer, or we're seeing all these chief growth officer roles now. Like, what are your thoughts there? I mean, do you see it at some point, as AI just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and evolves? Do you think there's going to be any changes in that role?
I think they're all just words. I hate job titles. I think marketing has always had to be the champion of customers. I think if in my experience of marketing, the primary outcome is always some form of growth, whether that's brand growth, financial growth, company growth. The role of, like, one of the things that I've found really pleasing and rewarding to see is that the role of good creative is more important, not less important, in this kind of technology era of just this content plethora. I think really good, skilled creative is so valuable, and the difference of it shines through more now than ever before. I think it's data. I think it's all of those things. I think it's call us chief jack of all trades, and you're probably getting closer to it.
Oh dear, I love it. I love it. But we did have a question from some of the guys that follow me on LinkedIn, and they kindly sent through a question which I thought, okay, I'm going to ask this, and it's a conversation that I've had with a few. What if I'm just curious to know, if you were looking back into your career, do you think that nowadays, or even I guess in general, is it important now to have a specialist skill set, or is it better to keep it broad as being a marketing generalist if you want to evolve into a leader?
I think, it's a great question. I think that the sweet spot is a blend of two. I think you will. Now, I don't know, because the workplace is changing and marketing has changed dramatically since I started. But if I think of my own career, it started in direct marketing. Before even email marketing, it was direct marketing, financial services. And that was part of the reason that took me into the not-for-profit space, was because it was pretty much credit cards or charities that were the big direct marketing vendors. And from there, from a direct marketing background, the progression into being the person in the team who evolved into digital was quite a natural step. And that early specialism in digital marketing, and I'm talking back in 2005, very much accelerated my career progression for a couple of different reasons. So I think early career, a specialism is maybe valuable for faster progression, but I think you need to branch out and build that generalist skill set to then evolve to the next level of leadership. So at some point, you need to be given the opportunity to step into things that you haven't had experience in, build that experience, and you need to be willing to take on areas where potentially you need to rely on the people in the team knowing that job better than you do.
Yeah. And I think, like, to your point earlier, you said about being curious, putting your hand up, and actually going, well, I'm going to give that a go, and sometimes you might start by going, on board, I'm a bit out of my depth, but before you know it, you've got another skill to add to your breadth, and creates that more generalist kind of viewpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very true of my background. Is across my career, I've periodically had leaders who've backed me to do something that they've seen I've had the potential to do, but I haven't had the experience in doing. And that's where your growth uplifts come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives you more confidence, of course, as well, which is awesome. We need more great leaders in the world, that's for sure.
Yeah, it does. It does. But I think confidence comes from experience of going, oh yeah, I've been in this situation before. I've navigated this previously. I can find my way through this.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Absolutely. So to wrap things up, I guess, what's the legacy? I mean, and I know you've got a couple more years, I've got no doubt, and bigger things still coming, I'm sure, your way. You're definitely not finished yet, I've got no doubt. But
I hope not. My marketing eulogy.
Yeah, it is a little bit like that.
Look, I think there's a couple of things. I think one of the things that's great about marketing is you get to do work that lives on, or be involved in things that carry on after you've handled them. So there's a couple of different initiatives over time. When I worked at Taronga Zoo, I was instrumental in the Vivid Sydney activation happening at Taronga Zoo with the big light animals. You get a lot of, long after I left there, I was still taking my kids back to experience that event. And there's a lot of pride in seeing things and going, oh, I was part of why that came to exist. And I think in marketing, there's lots of things like that, even if it's a piece of creative or a bit of copy that gets used again and again. And you go, oh, I remember the day we signed that off. So I think those things are very visible things. But I think the piece to really be remembered of, and this is certainly true for me, and I think and it spans all careers, the other people that you've helped along the way and the opportunities that you've enabled for people who I've worked with, people who I've been responsible for, and enabling their next career steps and what they've gone on to do.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, Libby, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. I know you're in a busy role, so thank you for making the time.
No, it's been great. Thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Remember, the road to CMO isn't always linear. It's filled with challenges, decisions, and moments of transformation. Whether you're charting your course or navigating a career shift, the experiences, wisdom shared today, as with our guests, is invaluable. Thank you for joining us. Keep dreaming big, keep pushing boundaries, and remember that your journey towards becoming a CMO is as much about the destination as it is about the growth you experience along the way. Until next time, continue to innovate, evolve, and carve out your path to CMO.